Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. The big stories tonight. The proposed Bayanihan II Act is one step closer to becoming law following the approval of the Bicameral Conference Committee, and just a little over an hour ago, the Senate ratified the bill as well. COVID-19 cases in the country now stands at 178,000, but a study from Ateneo de Manila University says some 3 million cases could have gone undetected. The government finally gives the green light to overseas deployment of healthcare working its address, Manila, province of China. With more people practicing urban gardening and agriculture, official want ornamental plants. It's NBA action. Let's start with both chambers of Congress approving a fresh round of COVID-19 stimulus plans through the Bayanihan II. The Senate has ratified the bill, while the lower house is set to follow suit on Monday. Los Baños gives the full report.
The Bicameral Conference Committee has allocated a total of 140 billion pesos plus a 25.5 billion peso standby fund under the Bayanihan to Recover as One Bill or Bayanihan II. The bill still provides allocation for emergency cash subsidy, but unlike in Bayanihan I, this will only be available to select low-income households. This includes those who did not receive their cash aid under the Bayanihan I.
So, mayroong emergency subsidy na 5,000 hanggang 8,000 para doon sa affected low-income households doon po sa areas under ECQ.
According to Senator Sonny Angara, who chairs the Senate Finance Committee, the biggest chunk of the total Bayanihan II fund will be allocated to the health sector. This includes a monthly special risk allowance and other COVID-19 related compensation. 10 billion pesos under the standby fund will also be allotted for procuring vaccines. Meanwhile, 5 billion pesos will be used for the hiring of 50,000 contact tracers. This will be facilitated by the Interior Department.
Bawat isa, contact tracer, 100,000 for the next 4 months or 25,000 a month. Although ang uunahin dito, ang may priority, yung mga barangay health workers, dahil sila po ay may exposure na sa health sector natin.
Lawmakers entered a deadlock last night over the budget for the tourism sector, which is among the hardest hit by the pandemic. This morning, both panels have agreed to give 10 billion pesos to the tourism sector, including 1 billion pesos for infrastructure, which will be under the DPWH.
There is 3 billion for DOLE, for tourism workers, dahil apektado po yan marami dyan ay hindi regular at ang tawag doon, casual lang or per project employee. No? So, maraming nawalan ng trabaho. Yung 3 billion in the DOLE programs for them, and there is 6 billion under the Small Business Corporation. Yun yung nagpapautang sa mga small businesses dahil marami dito sa ating mga tourism stakeholders ay mga 20-room hotels, 30-room hotels.
The education sector will be given additional budget of 8.9 billion pesos, 13 billion pesos for DOLE for the Cash for Work program, and 9.5 billion for the transportation sector.
We try to live up to the name of Bayanihan. Nagtulungan tayo rito. At we wish we could do more, but what can you do within the limits of the money available to our government? No? Uutang na nga tayo. So, pero nonetheless, talagang in-identify natin sino yung mga talagang tinamaan dito at nakinig tayo sa mga iba't ibang sektor at tinignan natin yung datos, bagsak talaga yung ekonomiya, bagsak talaga yung mga ibang industriya. Yun ang mga inuna natin, Sally.
The President will need to report to the Congress and the Commission on Audit once a month on how the funds are being disbursed. Once signed by the President, Bayanihan II can immediately take effect even without an IRR. It will be effective until December 19, 2020 or before Congress adjourns. Reporting for News 5, Los Baños, we are One News.
Under Bayanihan II, health workers should soon expect better hazard pay, that and other benefits which frontliners say are long overdue. Ria Fernandez with the story.
Private health workers treating COVID-19 patients may soon receive a special risk allowance worth at least 10,000 pesos. That's if the Bayanihan II bill becomes a law. Apart from the hazard pay, the BICAM-approved version of the bill also provided free life insurance, accommodation, and transportation for frontliners. All in all, the bill allotted 10.5 billion pesos for the compensation of health workers. Nurse MJ Ansay said this is a welcome development. While waiting for the deployment ban on medical professionals to be lifted, MJ decided to work in a private hospital. She said the additional compensation could be used to buy appropriate PPEs, especially since she is assigned in the emergency room.
Kung magkakaroon, malaking tulong. Tulong na din siya. Kumbaga, hindi man siya malaki, pero better than nothing.
Meanwhile, for Nurse Donel Siazon, who is also heading the Union of Workers at the UST hospital, it is high time for their sacrifices in the private sector to be recognized. He praised the proposed special risk allowance will not be just another promise.
Sa amin kasi hindi pa nga ho kami nakakatikim doon sa mga paunang dapat para din doon sa mga frontliners.
Donel hopes the same benefits would be extended to other medical staff and hospital workers who do not directly engage with COVID-19 patients.
Paano naman ho yung mga nasa laboratories, yung mga medtechs ho natin? Paano naman po yung mga maintenance natin, janitors natin, na naglilinis din ng wards ng mga yan, na kumukuha din ng mga waste sa mga patient na tinamaan po ng COVID.
Still, Donel is optimistic that the Bayanihan II will eventually pave the way for the enactment of their Magna Carta, which they have been pushing for a long time. Meanwhile, House Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano hopes the additional compensation may entice health workers to stay and serve the country this time of pandemic. Aside from the special risk allowance, the Bayanihan II also guarantees financial assistance to medical workers who contract COVID-19 while on duty. For News 5, Ria Fernandez, We Are One News.
Government is again allowing overseas deployment of healthcare workers. Pala spokesman Harry Roque says this is for medical professionals with overseas employment certificates from the POEA and verified employment contracts signed and prepared as of March 8, 2020. The national government previously suspended the overseas deployment of health professionals, supposedly to make sure that the country has enough manpower to deal with the COVID pandemic. As COVID-19 infections continue to rise, the Health Department has reported that nearly half of casualties from the pandemic did not even get proper medical treatment. DOH data shows that 48% of diseased COVID-19 patients were never admitted to hospitals nor any medical facilities. Several hospitals have declared full capacity in the previous weeks as cases climbed by the thousands. Today, more than 4,000 new cases were added to the tally that pushes total infections past 178,000. There are now more than 61,000 active cases, comprised mainly of mild infections. More than half of the fresh cases reported still come from Metro Manila. Meanwhile, the death toll from the virus closed in on the 3,000 mark with 88 more deaths reported over the past 24 hours. The DOH is reporting more than 700 new recoveries today. That pushes the total to more than 114,000. Meanwhile, the DOH announced that it is now reporting real-time cases after finally finishing its test result backlogs. The DOH says they can now validate test results immediately after receiving them from laboratories. But a study from Ateneo de Manila University says that nearly 3 million Filipinos could have contracted COVID-19 in the second quarter of the year, but only 1% of them, around 34,000, have been reported. DOH spokesperson Maria Rosario Vergere says they are now studying that data.
So we have referred it to our experts and also to our epidemiologists. Kinumpara rin niya yung iba't ibang bansa, no? Thailand, Singapore, with the Philippines. So lagi natin dapat alalahanin that comparing countries with different health system capacities and with different types of health system is not really appropriate.
One of the crucial factors in keeping the number of COVID-19 cases in the country at bay is contact tracing, but contact tracers say their job has become even more difficult these past few weeks. Camille Samonte explains.
Endless phone calls and residential visits. This is the everyday scenario of the contact tracing team in Barangay Addition Hills in Mandaluyong City as they track down people who might have been infected by a person who had tested positive for COVID-19. But things have become even more difficult for them because of the incomplete information provided by some COVID-19 patients. Some residents are also not transparent when it comes to their close contacts.
Pag nandun na kami sa area, yung cooperation talaga ng family, napakahirap. Unang-una, hindi mo hawak yung takbo ng isip nila eh. Magagalit.
Barangay contact tracers are appealing to residents to provide correct and complete information when filling out health declaration forms in the hospital and even in dining restaurants, salons, and other establishments. This will speed up the process to locate and inform those who might have had close contact with a COVID-19 patient.
Kasi what if, kung hindi ko siya matitrace ngayon, saan siya pupunta? Ilan pa maging close contact niya? Within one day, pwede mag-spread siya for more than 30 to 45 person.
They also urge the residents to cooperate in giving out necessary health status information to curb the community transmission in their barangay.
Malaking bagay po sa atin yung ating po mga community and yung ating mga leaders din. Pagka meron silang kapitbahay na meron doon isang linggong inuubo na. So nag-worried na agad sila. Kung kinakailangan isa-swab nila para makuha natin kung meron silang possibility na they are COVID, may transmission sa kanila.
Meanwhile, a pooled RT-PCR testing method is set to start in Cebu City, which will initially involve at least 4,000 market vendors. Iloilo Representative Janet Garin said pooled testing will help Cebu identify patients who are asymptomatic.
We discriminate. We put stigma on patients of cough or flu-like illness, not knowing that those who are asymptomatic but infected besides us can actually spread the virus.
However, the health department said pooled testing only works in areas with little incidence of COVID-19.
Because when there are a lot of cases in an area, especially, syempre, pag nag-pulse of 10 ka sa 100, baka lahat ng pulse mo ay positive kasi marami nang positive dun sa lugar. So usually we do this in low prevalence areas or low prevalence sectors.
For News 5, Camille Samonte, we are One News.
Meantime, the DOH is now looking into Israel's saliva test for COVID-19. The test was supposedly reported to be able to determine in less than a second if a person is infected with the coronavirus. DOH Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere says 4 lab experts are also studying the experiences of other countries with the technology. We'll pause for a short break, but when the big story returns, the government is planning to put up a tollway along EDSA next year. And a business in Binondo prints its address, Manila, a province of China. More on that after the break. I'm Robbie Alampa. You're watching The Big Story. Businesses in the metro reopened to stricter health protocols after the NCR and nearby provinces shifted back to general community quarantine yesterday. Church officials are asking why allow more people into restaurants and salons but not in places of worship. Laila Pangilinan with this story.
In Bagong Silang, Caloocan City, passengers of modernized jeepneys have successfully practiced physical distancing. The no face mask and shield no ride policy are also being monitored closely by the modernized jeepney staff. Aside from temperature check and foot soak, cashless payment is also being implemented. Once inside a modernized jeep, plastic covers are noticeably installed. These serve as partition to maintain 1 meter distance of each passenger. In Mega Q-Mart in Quezon City, only few market goers are seen roaming. While in this salon, employees underwent rapid testing to ensure the safety of both clients and employees. Walk-ins are not allowed, and clients must go online for booking.
Kasi naka 50% yung capacity lang natin. So para naman ma-maximize natin yung pasok ng mga clients. Kaya tayo mayroong online booking.
In Banawe, Quezon City, dine-in services of this Chinese restaurant is again available. Before entering, customers must go inside a glass misting booth, undergo temperature check, step on the foot bath, and have their hands sanitized. Each customer must also fill out a health declaration form for contact tracing purposes. Aside from the usual barriers and physical distancing per table, plates are sterilized through this apparatus in unenclosed areas and cling-wrapped along with the utensils. Tables and menus are also wiped clean every after use. And for those who want some privacy, they still offer their function rooms with a maximum of only 8 people allowed inside. For Lucy, being able to eat at a restaurant amid the GCQ is indeed a birthday party to remember.
Kahit papaano, nakalabas kami and we celebrated it.
Usually, pag birthday ni Mommy, talaga nagpapaparty kami sa house. But syempre, now na iba ang times ngayon, talagang kahit a small gathering na within the family, we try to celebrate it for our mom.
Meanwhile, Malacanang responded to a reported statement from Manila Auxiliary Bishop Roderick Pabilio, questioning why churches are allowed to open with only 10% capacity when places of worship are said to be safer than eating in restaurants and going to salons.
Itong pulisiya pong ito ay nabuo dahil din po nagkaroon po ng malawakan at mahabang konsultasyon sa mga alkalde ng Metro Manila dahil sila naman po magpapatupad ng kahit anong pulisiya na tinakda po ng IATF. At ito naman po ay nasa desisyon na rin ng mga mayor. Pasensya na lang po muna at gaya nga po sinabi ni GM Jojo, 10 araw lang po ito hanggang August 31.
For News 5, Laila Pangilinan, we are One News.
24-hour food delivery services are back in Metro Manila. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque confirmed this in the IATF virtual presser earlier today, but MMDA General Manager Jojo Garcia stresses courier services are only allowed to transport food, nothing else beyond the unified curfew hours. NAIA has added more domestic flights a day after Metro Manila shifted back to GCQ, but some passengers are still stranded in the airport as their flights remain canceled. Gerard de la Peña with the story.
RJ Dumaton was supposed to fly to Manila from Zamboanga last week to process documents for his work as a seafarer. But because Metro Manila was under modified enhanced community quarantine in the past 2 weeks, he only arrived in Metro Manila today.
Dati pa sana, nung last week pa sana ako nag-book, tapos walang eroplano sa amin, sir.
At the Terminal 3, there are 17 departing flights and 17 more arriving. The Civil Aeronautics Board said between August 19 to 31, there are only 206 flights at the NAIA, a far cry from pre-pandemic conditions where air carriers operate thousands of flights in a month. At the rate we are going, it looks like forecasts of a 4-year recovery for the aviation sector will hold true.
The outlook is still quite bleak at overall, ang alam naman natin ang dahilan nito yung pandemya. Pero specifically, ang halos lahat ng bansa sa mundo, sa buong mundo ay nag-impose ng kani-kanyang mga restrictions.
On top of that, some 67 LSIs are still taking refuge at the NAIA. Many of them are bound for Bacolod. One of them is Danny Gante. He has been staying at the airport since Metro Manila was placed under MECQ on August 3.
Mas mabuti na nga dito kaysa doon kami sa labas na sa tulay lang, sa ilalim ng tulay lang may matulog.
Transportation officials explained Most airports are open, especially for emergency situations. Only Iloilo and Bacolod have imposed restrictions at this point in time.
Meron pong pailan-ilan na nag-iiba. Halimbawa po, umabot na po yan nung nakaraan sa 35 airports pero may mga nagbago po ng isip. Halimbawa po yung Iloilo at Bacolod dahil na rin po sa sinabi nga po ni Yusek Raul kanina na puno po yung quarantine facilities dahil karamihan po ng ating mga seafarers at land-based OFW umuwi po doon.
Aviation officials vow to prioritize LSIs as soon as flights become available. For News 5, Gerard de la Peña, we are One News.
And these are the other big stories today. The families of 14 Filipino fishermen who went missing in the waters of Mindoro have agreed to an amicable settlement with the management of Hong Kong-flagged MV Vienna Wood, which collided with their fishing boat Liberty 5 last June. The Coast Guard says each family will receive 1 million pesos while the owner of FB Liberty 5 will receive 40 million pesos. Manila Mayor Isko Moreno has ordered the shutdown of an establishment in Binondo which printed Manila as a, quote, province of China in its packaging. PBA Party List Representative Jericho Nograles sought to blacklist the Chinese beauty product, but the palace has downplayed the issue, saying no one actually believes the claim. The Transportation Department is looking at putting up a tollway along EDSA next year. In an interview with the chief, the OTR Assistant Secretary Alberto Swansing said this will help ease EDSA's traffic as well as generate revenue.
Maisaayos lang namin yung public transport dyan sa EDSA. Pag dumaan ka dyan sa stretch ng EDSA, let's say from Quezon Ave hanggang doon sa Rojas Boulevard, we'll have to pay toll.
Coming up on the big story, the government is jumping on the urban gardening trend not to plant seeds but to possibly regulate sellers of ornamental plants. And the Dallas Mavericks finally nabbed their first playoff win in 4 years. Watch the highlights when the big story returns. This is the big story. I'm Robbie Alampay. With a growing trend of urban gardening amid the pandemic, an official from the Bureau of Plant Industry believes there's need to regulate so-called plantitos and plantitas. Marian Enriquez tells us why in this report.
37-year-old Belle is a certified plantita. She has been collecting plants for almost a year now, and because of the growing number of plants in her home and the rising trend of ornamental plants amid the pandemic, she decided to make a profit out of it.
Ang dami na naming plants. And then one time, someone asked me if nagbibenta daw ba ako. Para ako, naisip ko, since ang hilig namin bumili ng plants, why not sell some of them? Kasi syempre, ang dami ko na rin na-propagate ng mga plants.
Her ornamental plants, Algonemas, Philodendron Line, Caladium, and Monstera adansoni can be sold from 250 to 800 pesos. And because ornamental gardening is growing fast across the country, agriculturist from the Bureau of Plant Industry, Ernie Lito Bolyosa, suggests that the government should come up with an accreditation process for sellers of ornamental plants. Bolyosa stressed that this will give plantitos and plantitas out there easy access to government support and credit.
Isa dyan yung pwedeng gawin sila ng cooperative. Sama-sama sila and then pwedeng bigyan po sila ng facilities, tulungan po sila in terms of capacity building, paano yung pagtatayo ng isang magandang nursery. We have the good agricultural practices.
Agriculture Secretary William Dar said they still have to study the proposal. However, he assured those into urban gardening that the government will always extend help to them. But on the issue whether ornamental plants should now be regulated, the Secretary thinks otherwise.
Ko pa rin nakikita yung ganun na necessity.
bumabangon lang sila ngayon. Aesthetics yan, may contribution sa siguro mental health. So, okay yun. Bakit mo i-regulate?
For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
Fast break to some sports action. The Dallas Mavericks scored their first playoff win since 2016 as they outshined the LA Clippers 127-114. Luka Doncic contributed 28 points, 8 rebounds, and 7 assists to the Mavericks win. Despite leading the team, Doncic was sent to the bench in the third quarter for foul trouble. Meanwhile, defending champions Toronto Raptors clawed their way to victory against Brooklyn Nets 104-99. The Raptors reserve Norman Powell caught everyone's attention as he scored 12 of his 24 points in the final quarter. Fred VanVleet also delivered a double-double of 24 points and 10 assists to get the Raptors' second win in the best-of-7 series. And that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. Signal channels 8 and 250. Please like our Facebook page, One News, for more in-depth analysis. Visit our webpage, onenews.ph. You can also catch One News on the Signal Play app. Register for a free account now at signalplay.com and stream One News live anytime, anywhere. I'm Robbie Alampay. We are One News. Good evening.